right, we have two images by Daniel. You're an ISO 160, 140 millimeter lens, so a pretty long lens here. F5 at 1/800th of a second. So in this case, I think a longer lens works because it allows that F5 to be a shallower depth of field. It also allows this guy to be out there doing his thing, doing whatever he is, going out for a run, warming up for practice, whatever he's doing, without you feeling like you're being really invasive to him. So this feels like it allows him to be more natural in what he's doing. I'd say both of these images have more of like a documentary feel. It could also come across as having like an editorial feel to it. So I think either way could work for both of your images. The lighting here is a little bit distracting as he's leaning down and the light just comes on the back of his head and like almost hits his eye. If he was just faced the opposite way, I think this could work a lot better. Or if you were photographing and having him look up a little bit more. So this light would be illuminating his face, opposed to his jacket being the most important, brightest, best lit area of this image. And then your second image, we have the same guy, but this feels like it could be more of like an editorial shot of him out at the dock, kind of talking about a lifestyle, right? So here he is in his shorts and sweater, like, I don't know, I think that indicates like boat clothing, right? And then we see the boats in the background. We see, I think, the bay in the background. So we're getting all of that. The lighting here across his face is better as it's illuminating half of his face. Bringing in a reflector, I think, would allow us to have more light on that other side of his face and open that up and make him pop from the background a little bit more. You're again using a longer lens here at 115 millimeters, so not quite as long as what we had there, but still a longer lens. F5 at 1/1250th of a second, so that works well. Maybe showing a little bit more of the boat would be nice so we know where we are and what we're looking at. I guess we can all assume that this is a boat. It looks like it's hooked up and it's like getting washed or something as the cord's going up to it, but adding even more about that narrative and his involvement in the scene, I think would help. This image is by Angelina. You're at ISO 400, 55 millimeters, f5.6 at 1/5 of a second. So all those settings look good as far as the amount of light hitting the image sensor. But as we look at this, he's just not sharp. That 1/5 of a second looks like it was just too long for him to be holding still. So his watch isn't sharp, his face isn't sharp. Like no part of this do we find that place where our eye can rest. So in this image, I would encourage you to bring in more light so you can shoot with a faster shutter speed. You're already at ISO 400, so we'd prefer not to have this any higher because I don't think your camera will handle much of a higher ISO. You could open up your aperture a little bit if your camera lens goes to 3.5 here. Yeah, so you could get another stop of light there by opening up your aperture, another stop or stop and a half, and then that would give you a little bit of a faster shutter speed. Otherwise, you're just going to need to bring in more light. If you're using hot lights here, I'm not sure what your lighting source is, then strobe is going to be a much stronger light source and something that you might think of investing as you move forward with portraiture. And then here you're at ISO 100, 41 millimeters, f5 at 1/60th of a second. So this image is nice and sharp. You can see that adjustment there. The first image feels more like a fashion beauty shot. This feels more commercial, like he paid you for photographs of him, right? So that's working well. Again, I mentioned in the last image, strobe and how that could illuminate your subject with a stronger light. In the same way, here you could bring a strobe and underexpose so you don't have that bright area in the background or on his face, and then pop some light in there because strobes you can take with you on location. So that would be a great option for this. In general, we can see that area on his forehead is getting pretty blown out there. So we want to avoid that. So moving him more into the shade to avoid that, or embracing the light and moving all the way into the light. Either of those would be better options. I'd probably pull him more towards the shade. That would be my personal preference. And then we have these last two images by Allison. You're at ISO 800, 35 millimeters, f11 at 1/45th of a second. So that is working, but we are seeing, actually, let's see the size of this image. Seems like it's getting pretty pixelated. It's getting really pixelated. I was going to say it's out of focus, but the more I look at it, it's actually pixelated. You can see that for sure back here, but I was just trying to look at her face. So I don't think this is out of focus. I think you might have just had a smaller image that you enlarged. So this is a pretty pixelated image. The light, the window light that's coming in on her face is working really well to illuminate her and kind of tell that story that you're looking for, right? That she's stuck inside. It looks like she's playing a game, not doing homework, but she's stuck inside and wants to be outside playing. And then it's fun to look around and see the different elements like the Yahtzee and the cone for a dog and then family pictures in the background. So a lot of fun things to kind of fill out this story. It looks like maybe battleship or a boat model there too. A lot of fun things to fill out the story. But if the narrative is really to show that she wants to be outside, either showing that outside or someone had mentioned including the window, and I'm not sure if they meant like changing your angle of view and showing that she could look out the window, or using the window being outside and then looking back at her inside. And I think that could work really well, especially if you could use a reflection on the window. And if her sister and brother are out playing soccer, just kicking a ball around in the backyard, and she's stuck inside on her tablet doing homework, that starts to fill out that narrative. This image feels more documentary. And then this feels more, I guess this feels like a documentary image also. You're at her home and you're photographing her in her space. You're at ISO 400, 35 millimeters, f8 at 1/100th of a second. Both of these images and your whole contact sheet have really blue tonality to them again. So we saw that last week with your image and we're seeing it again this week. So we need to adjust the white balance. And I would encourage you just to shoot raw images, and then you don't need to set a white balance. You can adjust that in post-processing after the fact, because you can see all of these are looking really blue. If we neutralize that, that's a huge difference. I don't think that's a really accurate adjustment, but you can see that that's a huge difference and much more accurate than this is. So we really need to adjust that white balance on both images, and that is going to be done best by photographing this using a raw format and then making any adjustments to the white balance in post-processing. So both of these have more of like a documentary feel. You're at home with her. You're telling different stories from her being here, working on her computer, and then being home outside, enjoying herself much more in this image. This image feels cropped overly tight on the bottom, but then a lot of extra space around her. So shooting this more as a vertical image or moving back and including the whole scene, I think would work better here.